September 8, 2016. It is a quiet, overcast Thursday in Bradford, West Yorkshire, on Hallfield Road, a nondescript industrial street lined with red brick buildings and parked sedans. Life moves at a sluggish pace. There is nothing remarkable about the two-story building at the centre of the block. It looks like any other small business in the north of England. The signage is modest. The windows are secure. To the passing drivers and the pedestrians with their heads down against the wind, it is just a jewellery business. A family firm. A piece of local history. But inside, the air is thick, with a smell that is unmistakable to those who know it. It is the metallic, musty, chemical scent of millions of pounds in used banknotes. Inside the secure counting room, the sound is deafening. It is not the sound of polishing wheels or the delicate tapping of a goldsmith's hammer. It is the relentless, mechanical whir of industrial cash-counting machines. They are running hot, spinning through stacks of 20 and 50-pound notes, so fast the friction heats the paper. Men are sweating. Not from the furnace of a smelter, but from the physical exertion of hauling heavy sports bags, dragging them across the floor, unzipping them to reveal bricks of cash wrapped in elastic bands. They are drowning in money. This is not a bank. This is not a casino. This is Fowler Oldfield. And unbeknownst to the men stacking the cash, they are currently standing in the centre of the largest money laundering engine ever discovered in the United Kingdom. Outside, the silence of the street is about to shatter. In unmarked vans parked just out of sight, officers from the National Crime Agency are checking their watches. They have been watching. They have been listening. And they know that behind those reinforced doors, the criminal underworld of Britain is washing its dirty laundry. In seconds, the steel doors will buckle, the counting machines will stop, and a £266 million empire will begin to crumble into dust. But to understand how a modest Bradford jeweller became the bank manager for the country's most violent drug cartels, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to look at the seduction of easy money, and the moment a legitimate business decided to cross the line. Bradford has always been a city of industry. Once the wool capital of the world, it transitioned over the decades, finding new trades, new hustles. The jewellery trade was one of them. Fowler Oldfield was a name that carried weight. Established as a family business, it had a reputation for buying scrap gold from jewellers, melting it down, refining it, and selling it back into the market. It was a trade built on trust, on margins, and on volume. For years, it operated within the lines. It was the kind of place where local jewellers would drop off a bag of old chains and rings, have a cup of tea, and wait for a bank transfer. But the economy changes. Margins get tighter. The temptation to find an edge grows. In the early 2010s, the company came under the control of Gregory Frankel and Daniel Rawson. These were not hardened gangsters with scars and tattoos. They were businessmen. They wore suits. They understood spreadsheets, commodities, and the global price of gold. But they also understood that the gold market is hungry, and it doesn't ask questions about where the money comes from to buy the metal. At some point, the business model shifted. It wasn't a sudden explosion, but a slow, creeping corruption. The logic was simple. Criminal gangs across the UK are cash-rich, but asset-poor. If you are a drug lord in Liverpool or a cocaine supplier in London, your biggest problem isn't making money. It is moving it. You cannot walk into a high-street bank with a suitcase containing £500,000. You cannot buy a mansion with a bag of 20s. You need that money to become digital. You need it to look clean. And the gold industry offered the perfect loophole. Gold is a high-value commodity. It can be bought with cash, melted down, reformed, and sold. Once the gold is sold, the money that comes back is clean business revenue. It was the perfect wash cycle. Frankel and his associates realized that if they stopped asking questions about where the cash was coming from, their turnover would skyrocket. And it did. They opened the doors to the underworld, and the underworld walked right in. By 2014, the transformation was complete. The quiet refinery had become a specialized banking service for organized crime. The mechanics of the operation were staggering in their simplicity and their scale. It operated like a logistics company. Criminal networks from across the country, Liverpool, London, Birmingham, Essex, would coordinate deliveries. These weren't subtle exchanges in dark alleys. This was industrial. Couriers would drive up the M1 and the M62 in nondescript hatchbacks and vans. In the boot, there would be holdalls, heavy-duty shopping bags, sometimes just plastic bin liners, all stuffed to the brim with street cash. This was dirty money, in the most literal sense. It carried the traces of the drug trade. The notes were crumpled, stained and contaminated with cocaine residue. When the couriers arrived at Hallfield Road, they were buzzed in through an airlock security system. There were no receipts, no questions about the source of funds. There was just a token system. To ensure the right criminal got credit for the right drop, the gangs used a method straight out of a spy novel, but adapted for the modern thug. The courier would present a single £5 note. The serial number on that note was the password. The staff at Fowler Oldfield would check the serial number against a list sent to them via encrypted phones. If it matched, the transaction was approved. The bags were dragged into the counting room, and the machines would roar to life. The scale of the intake was frantic. We are not talking about a few £1,000s a week. We are talking about millions of pounds a day. There were days when the floor of the counting room was invisible, covered entirely by carpets of cash. The staff worked like factory line workers, breaking the bundles, feeding the hoppers, and logging the totals. Once the cash was counted, it had to move. You cannot keep millions in paper currency sitting in a commercial unit in Bradford. It's too dangerous. This is where the genius of the scheme kicked in. Fowler Oldfield had accounts with major banks. They were running a legitimate gold business. After all, they would deposit this cash into their business accounts, claiming it was the proceeds from cash sales of gold to walk-in customers. To the banks, it looked like Fowler Oldfield was just doing incredible business. They were depositing heavy volumes of cash, yes, but they had the paperwork to back it. Up fake invoices, forged receipts, fictional customers. Once the money was in the banking system, it was wired out to buy gold. The gold was then sold to companies in Dubai or elsewhere, and the money would return, fully laundered, ready to be transferred to the drug lords' offshore accounts, or used to buy more drugs to restart the cycle. The money was moving so fast that G4's vans were arriving multiple times a day to collect the cash deposits. The sheer weight of the notes was a logistical nightmare. £1 million in £20 notes weighs roughly 50 kilograms. The gang was moving hundreds of kilograms of paper every week. The staff at the refinery began to joke about the absurdity of it. They were drowning in wealth that wasn't theirs. They were the middle management of the drug trade, processing the profits of misery that had been harvested from addicts on estate corners hundreds of miles away. But arrogance is a blinding light. When you move that much money for that long without getting caught, you start to believe you are untouchable. You start to believe the system is too stupid to notice. You forget that in the digital age, money leaves a footprint, even when you try to wash it away. Enter the National Crime Agency. The police didn't stumble upon Fowler Oldfield by accident. It began with intelligence gathered on the streets. Local police forces were noticing a pattern. Drug dealers were being arrested, but the money wasn't there. It was moving upstream too quickly. Intelligence reports started trickling in about couriers heading to West Yorkshire. Then came the surveillance. Operation Rognvald was born. It was a classic cat-and-mouse game, played out on the motorways of England and the CCTV screens of Bradford. The NCA started tracking the couriers. They watched men meet in car parks. They followed the cars. And every road led to Hallfield Road. The surveillance teams set up shop. They watched the entrance of Fowler Oldfield. They saw the pattern. The car pulls up. A young man in a tracksuit gets out. He struggles with the weight of a heavy sports bag. He buzzes the door. He disappears inside. 20 minutes later, he comes out light, swinging the empty bag. He gets back in the car and drives away. An hour later, a G4's armored truck pulls up. The guards go in empty-handed and come out struggling with heavy secure boxes. The input was dirty bags. The output was banking deposits. It was a conveyor belt. The investigators started to dig into the finances. They looked at the company's tax returns and their banking activity. The numbers were astronomical. The business was claiming to buy vast amounts of scrap gold from the public. But the CCTV didn't show lines of grandmothers selling their old wedding rings. It showed young men from known crime families delivering holdalls. The discrepancy was the smoking gun. The investigators calculated that for Fowler Oldfield's cash deposits to be legitimate, There would have to be a queue of people selling gold stretching out the door and down the street every single day. The math didn't work. The narrative fell apart. But the NCA needed more than just suspicion. They needed to catch them in the act. They needed to prove that the people running the refinery knew exactly what they were doing. They needed to pierce the corporate veil. This involved deeper surveillance, probing the communications, and understanding the network. They identified the key players: Frankel, the director who orchestrated the corporate facade; Rawson, his right-hand man; and the network of couriers, including a flashy socialite named James Stunt, whose involvement would later bring a media circus to the case. The tension mounted. The investigators knew they were sitting on a powder keg. Every day they waited was another £1 million successfully laundered for violent gangs. Another £1 million that could be used to buy guns, import cocaine, and corrupt communities. But they had to wait for the perfect moment. They had to strike when the vault was full. That moment came on that grey Thursday in September. The order was given. The raid was coordinated to hit not just the refinery, but multiple residential addresses simultaneously. When the police breached the doors at Hallfield Road, the scene was almost comical in its excess. The officers found the counting room in full swing. The machines were humming. There were bundles of cash on the desks, on the floor, in open safes. It was everywhere. They found meticulous ledgers. They found the tokens, the £5 notes used as passwords. They seized CCTV footage from inside the building, which would become the most damning evidence of all. The footage showed the staff joking as they handled the cash. It showed them celebrating the massive volumes. It showed a complete lack of concern for the source of the funds. In one clip, a courier brought in a bag that was so heavy he dragged it across the floor. The staff didn't ask for it. They didn't ask for a receipt. They just pointed to the counting room. The arrest of Gregory Frankel and his associates marked the end of the operation, but the beginning of the legal war. The defense tried to argue that they were simple businessmen, duped by criminals, that they had no way of knowing the money was dirty. They claimed they were running a high-volume, low-margin business, and that cash was just part of the trade. But the evidence was overwhelming. The sheer volume of cash, £266 million, processed in a defined period, was indefensible. The prosecution laid out the case. Fowler Oldfield was not a victim. It was a willing participant. It was the central nervous system of the UK's money laundering capability. The courtroom battle was long and complex. It peeled back the layers of the gold industry, exposing how easily commodities can be used to hide criminal profits. The jury saw the pictures of the cash. They saw the text messages. They saw the connections to known criminals. The token system was particularly damaging. Why would a legitimate business need a password system based on banknote serial numbers unless they were hiding the identity of their clients? The verdict was inevitable. The jury returned guilty verdicts. The sentences handed down were severe, reflecting the magnitude of the crime. The judge made it clear, without people like Frankel and Rawson, the drug gangs cannot operate. The launderers are the enablers. They are the ones who make the crime profitable. Gregory Frankel and the others were sent to prison for years. The refinery was shut down.
The assets were seized.
But the impact of the case reverberated far beyond Bradford. It forced a change in how the UK authorities look at the gold trade. It exposed a gaping hole in the anti-money laundering regulations. It showed that you don't need a sophisticated offshore banking network to wash millions. You just need a sympathetic business owner with a counting machine and a lack of morals. The Fowler Oldfield case remains a landmark in British criminal history. It was a collision between the old world of industry and the new world of organized crime. It was a story of greed, pure and simple. The hunger for profit blinded the operators to the reality of what they were doing. They weren't just counting paper. They were counting the proceeds of addiction, violence, and exploitation. They thought they could sit in their office in Bradford, insulated from the blood on the streets, and take their cut. They thought the heavy steel doors would protect them. They thought the industrial counting machines would drown out the sirens. They were wrong. In the end, the silence returned to Hallfield Road. The building stands there still, a monument to a collapsed empire. The millions are gone. The gold is gone. And the men who thought they had cracked the code to infinite wealth are sitting in cells, left with nothing but the memory of the sound of the machines, spinning and spinning, counting money that was never really theirs. The game of money and power is seductive, but in the UK, the house eventually wins. And when the house comes knocking, it doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door down.